ran on in our commitment to America that we would work to secure America's border. Because since the day Joe Biden took office, he took very specific actions to open up America's border. Day one, he halted construction of the wall. He terminated the Remain in Mexico policy, ended agreements with Northern Triangle countries. And Joe Biden sent a message that America's border is open. And millions of people answered that call and started coming across our border illegally. We don't know the exact number because the White House won't tell the American people how many have come across our border illegally, nor will they tell the country where all of those people have gone. Governors don't even know how many people are sent into their states at dark of night that will be put into their school systems. Who knows what else has happened? We do know this. Many people on the terrorist watch list have been caught coming across our southern border since Joe Biden opened it up. Again, we've never been able to find out an exact number. That's something we're working on, but it's something that should concern all Americans. And we're not just talking about people coming from South and Central America. We've already identified over 140 different countries that are represented coming across our border illegally since Joe Biden took office. This is a national crisis. It's creating a lot of other problems too. We see the fentanyl crisis and how bad it's gotten. Last year, we lost almost 100,000 young people who died from drug overdoses from drugs like fentanyl, which are made in China, pass through the cartels across our open southern border. Every single day in America, nearly 300 young people die because of fentanyl overdoses due to Joe Biden's open southern border. And what has President Biden's answer been? Every day, yesterday, today, 300 young people will die from drug overdoses from fentanyl. Tomorrow, another 300 people will die because of overdoses from drugs like fentanyl. And yet President Biden doesn't want to do a thing to change that because he wants an open southern border. Well, I can tell you House Republicans are fed up and House Republicans are taking action. The chairman and members behind me have been hard at work in the committees of jurisdiction, Judiciary Committee, Homeland Security Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee. All have taken action now over the last few weeks to put together what I would call the strongest border security package that Congress has ever taken up. And when we return in May, the same week that Title 42 expires, we're going to bring a border security package and pass it through this House of Representatives. And we challenge President Biden to work with us to solve this problem. We're going to show the president how to solve the problem. While he's appointed his vice president to be the border czar, and she won't even acknowledge that this is a problem, most Americans know this is out of control, and the open southern border has to be closed and resolved. And let's get back to a working, functioning, legal immigration system that we're so far removed from. I want to applaud the members who have been hard at work on this. We have had meetings for months now with individual members, with groups of members to work through all of the complicated issues. And I'm excited to have these chairmen that have been working on these issues and then moving those bills through their committee to address this problem. And I will start with the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan.
So 350,000 unaccompanied children in the last 2 years have come into our country, and Joe Biden's administration doesn't know where 85,000 of those kids are. That is, they don't know where they are, and those that they do know where they are, there is no vetting process for the homes and the places these children go to, no follow-up other than a phone call to these places. Our bill is designed to stop that. And understand this, too, as the leader mentioned. This is the result of intentional policies this administration has started from day one. As Steve mentioned, day one they said no more wall, no more remain in Mexico. You get to our country, you're going to be released somewhere into the country. So we put together what we believe is the strongest immigration enforcement legislation ever. It deals with the unaccompanied alien children issue I just talked about. It deals with the Flores situation, deals with asylum, E-Verify, parole authority, and of course the remain in Mexico policy, as well as visa overstay issues. We think it's a strong bill that will correct the problem I described and correct the problems we have seen now the entire 2 years of this administration. And I really want to thank, as Steve mentioned, this was a team effort. I really want to thank the members on our committee, Mr. McClintock, Mr. Biggs, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Roy, Mr. Tiffany, Mr. Moran, Mr. Bentz, and then two individuals not on the committee, Mr. Carter and Mr. Calvert, for sponsoring the elements that became this piece of legislation, which is going to get combined, I believe, with the good work that Mr. Green has done in his committee and the bill they passed, I guess, this morning out of their committee, and Mr. McCall, whose bill passed yesterday as well. So that's what we're going to have, and we're going to be on the floor, as the leader mentioned, in a couple weeks, and take that first step into getting control of our border that hasn't been under control at all for this administration. With that, I'll yield to the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, Mr. Green.
In 2020, the nation saw about just under 500,000 people come into the country. In 2021, almost 2 million, 4 times the year prior. If you look at the last 2 years of the Biden administration and add all the numbers up, the 5 million encounters, the 1.4 million gotaways, you put it all together, we're talking well over 6 million people, more, by the way, than many states' population, like 25 state populations, by the way. It's greater than all of the folks who came in under President Obama and President Trump, 12 years combined in just 2 years. What happened? Well, we didn't cut the budget. We didn't suddenly decrease the size of Customs and Border Patrol. What Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas did is they did away with 89 policies of previous presidents. That was the difference. They allowed the return agreements with other countries to completely expire so that ICE has no way to send people back home because the agreements have expired. This was intentional. And when I got the gavel, we came in, we took a bunch to the border with boot camp, and we had a hearing on the border where we learned that Chief Ortiz admitted that Secretary Mayorkas' statement that we had operational control of the southern border was a lie, and we do not have. In fact, he went on to say 5 of our 9 sectors of our southwest border are under the control of the drug cartels. That's the chief of the Border Patrol. These decisions made by Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas have facilitated the drug cartels using a strategy of overwhelming the crossing sites, tying up Customs and Border Patrol, and then sliding the drugs around them in the thinned out rural areas. And when Merrick Garland agreed to that in front of the Senate, the Secretary Mayorkas was asked, do you know about this strategy? And Secretary Mayorkas said, no, I didn't know any. The Secretary of Homeland Security doesn't know the major strategy of the drug cartels. He admitted it in the United States Senate. Well, we made a commitment to secure our border. And you heard about Jim's bill this morning at 3 a.m. The Republican members of the Committee of Homeland Security, Michael Guest is my vice chair, and so many others, culminated the work of several months of stubby pencil, backroom work, figuring out just the language that would get the job done and deliver for the American people, and we did that. And there are many aspects to this bill. We took the money that hasn't been spent. We're going to build 900 miles of wall. We're going to clear cedar and Chorizo cane that's blocking the view of Border Patrol. We're going to take care of those Border Patrol agents. 17 suicides in a force of 17,000 because they're overwhelmed with this open border. Mr. Biden care? No. He didn't care. They even made fun of them and denigrated them, knowing full well that those men weren't whipping those migrants. We have the proof now, by the way. There are many other aspects: technology, license plate readers, authorizations for the Border Patrol to do things they need to do their job. And it has been an honor to work with the members of this committee. I owe it to every single member. We owe it to every single member of this committee for doing the hard work that they've done. And it's been an honor to work with them and get that bill done. And if I seem a bit pressured, it's because we were up till 3 a.m. getting it done.
Oh, yeah.
But right there with Chairman McCall, who is with us also. I'd like to turn it over to my vice chair and a great American from Mississippi, Mr. Guest.
Make no mistake, our border is broken. This administration has been unwilling or unable to secure the southwest border. Statistics show FY21, under President Biden, we set a record of 1.9 million encounters along our border. Last year, FY22, we shattered that record with more than 2.7 million encounters along the southwest border. And now in FY23, we are expected to break that once again with a number that is projected to exceed over 3 million. And that number is projected before Title 42 expires 2 weeks from today. Additionally, we know that drugs smuggled across our borders are killing young people at an alarming rate. And our Border Patrol agents are experiencing a crisis of morale. Secretary Mayorkas, as Chairman Green spoke of moments ago, continues to deny the crisis that exists on our border, even as his chief of patrol recently testified before Congress that 5 of the 9 sectors along the southwest border were not secure. House Republicans are stepping in to fill that gap of leadership created by the inactions of this administration. This legislation will hire thousands of new agents. It will pay retention bonus to frontline officers. We will invest in new technology. We will construct hundreds of miles of walls and barriers, and we will support our local and our state partners. The time to act is now, and Republicans must lead this fight. The fight to secure our border, the fight to support the hardworking men and women of law enforcement, and the fight to stop the flow of illegal drugs coming into our communities that are killing young Americans. I promise you, I pledge to you that as Republicans, we will not back down from this fight, that we will bring this legislation to the floor, and that we will combat the failures of the Biden administration. At this time, I would like to introduce to you my friend from the great state of Texas, the Chairman of Foreign Affairs, Chairman McCall.
Thanks, Leader. Jim, great work on Judiciary, and we're up till, what, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning? Good work. Good work. Look, I'll speak plain talk. I've dealt with this issue for 20 years in Congress. Prior to that, I was a federal prosecutor. I had as U.S. Attorney, the border in my district. My first bill 20 years ago was to end catch and release. And here we are 20 years later, same policy. I know this border well because my state of Texas bears the burden. My state has appropriated $4.5 billion just this session to deal with a federal government issue. It's not a state issue. It's a responsibility of the federal government. And they have the federal government has completely failed. As I told Mayorkas, you have failed in your job. Interestingly, when he went down to the Border Patrol agents turned their backs on him because, by what they said, he turned his back on them. The morale has never been worse. I've seen this movie so many times, and I've tried to fix it so many times. And we have a fix to it. But this is the worst I've ever seen it on the border. It is wide open. And why? Because the first thing the Biden administration did with a stroke of a pen was to rescind remain in Mexico, to rescind the migrant protection protocols, which were working. What that meant was, if you come into the United States, you will have to remain in Mexico pending your political asylum claim. 15% are justified, 85% are usually not. But what did that do? It sent a message. It sent a message to the cartels. It sent a message to the cartels that we're not open for business anymore. And what Biden did by rescinding remain in Mexico sent a message to the cartels, open for business, come on in. 5 million people encounters. What are we going to do with 5 million people? 100,000 deaths due to fentanyls? My oldest daughter's been to 5 funerals. My son went to one just last Sunday. It's killing young people in America. It's dangerous. Criminals coming in. People on the terrorist watch list, for God's sakes. This is irresponsible. And we need to fix it. And you know what? As I said last night on our committee, this should not be a partisan issue. This should be an American issue, protecting the sovereignty of the United States and our borders from the threats that we see. My bill out of the Foreign Affairs Committee will reinstate remain in Mexico. It will reinstate the migrant protection protocols and the asylum claim laws with Central America so we can shut this thing down. Shut it down. This is the root cause of the entire crisis. So I want to thank the leaders, leader, this leader, Mr. Guest, this guy, 3 o'clock in the morning. Thank you. This is an answer, a solution. It should be bipartisan. It's sad it's not. I told Benny Thompson that last night. Why can't this be bipartisan? We used to do that. But this is going to be the Republican solution to the problem. Thank you.
With that, we'll be happy to take some questions.
Thank you. Are you confident that you would have 218 bills on the floor if you bring this to the floor next month?
Well, our members have been very interested in having us bring a border security package to the floor since we ran on this last year, and especially since we took the majority. Obviously, our members want to know what the final product is, and so we've been working for months to put that together. And as you can see, it's gone through 3 different committees. It's a number of bills that have gone through those committees. So now that we have all the bills out, we're going to get that information to our members. I'm very confident we're going to pass it when we return in May. And again, let's challenge the president and the Senate to not only acknowledge this problem, but to join with us in actually doing something about this problem instead of sitting back and letting 300 young people die every single day and they don't care.
Can you talk about the issue of asylum specifically? That was a sticking point when earlier versions of the bill came out. We wanted to pass it in the first 2 weeks of Congress, and that led, with the opposition there, that led to you all going back to the drawing board. How did you find agreement there, or are there still sticking points?
Yeah, we had a lot of meetings with our members that are most interested in the details of this, both on the committee and off. I'm going to ask Chairman Jordan to come up and talk about it, but I was in all of those meetings and watched people like Chip Roy, Mario Diaz-Balart, Carlos Jimenez, Tony Gonzalez, Tom McClintock, all coming together and figuring this out and saying, how do we address this problem? We understand why asylum is there. The asylum process was being completely abused and ignored. And so if we make the asylum process work again, what we really want to do is take away the magnet that is encouraging people to come here illegally that don't have valid asylum claims. That's what Joe Biden did. That's what we fix in this bill. Jim can get into the details.
Well, I would just add, we want quicker adjudication, as the leader talked about, of those asylum claims, and the legitimate ones that Mr. McCall referenced, truly, eligible for asylum, we want them to get that in a faster time frame. So what our legislation says is you come to the border, you file your asylum claim. If we have space for detention, we will detain people while that's being evaluated. We think that'll move it quicker. And if not, then they will be returned to their home as they await their claim. That makes sense. That's consistent with the MPP policy that was in place in the prior administration, the language that's in Mr. McCall's bill. And as the leader pointed out, we had broad discussions across the conference, and we think we arrived at something that is going to help everybody and get 218 votes.
Yes, sir.
So is the language between these packages, is any of it going to have to be resolved before it's combining from one row and put on the floor? Can you do that without any changes?
Yeah, we could package it all together. If you watch what we did with the Lower Energy Costs Act, it's probably a good model for how we're handling this. There were almost 20 different bills on what ultimately became H.R. 1. So what we did is take all the different pieces that came out of multiple committees, all dealing with lowering energy costs, and then put them into one package, H.R. 1, and you put them in different titles based on which piece they're addressing of that. Here, in this case, all fall under the category of border security, but 3 different committees with a number of different bills addressing all of these different problems, and so we'll pull them all together into one piece of legislation. Yes, ma'am.
Thomas Massey voted against the Judiciary bill, the E-Verify language. I think other members of the Newhouse have questions about that piece. Were you having conversations with them, and do you anticipate this?
Yeah, in fact, I talked to Dan Newhouse again this morning about that. We're continuing to have conversations with our members. And a lot of the members have been watching how all the pieces have been coming together. And again, those who are the most passionate about this, that have some of their own ideas, have been working with us, coming into some of these meetings. And then ultimately, you work through those issues, and then we'll bring the package to the floor. Yeah.
Do you plan on having a line of communication with either the administration or red state senators so that this, or should I say, red state Democrat senators in order to get this passed?
Something tells me they're going to be hearing about it from their constituents. We all have been heeding the calls from all of our constituents. This is not just an issue that involves border state members. As we've seen and pointed out for over a year and a half now, because of what Joe Biden did to open up our border and not just create this crisis in states like Texas, but then to have other groups literally at dark of night shipping people to every state in America. Every state is now a border state. And we don't know how bad the problem is because they're hiding these facts from the American people. Every one of you should be asking the White House, will you give us a number of how many people have come across illegally and where have you sent them? They're being sent somewhere. In many cases, and it's been reported, at dark of night, they were having a committee hearing until 3 o'clock in the morning. Every night our border security is at the border at 3 o'clock in the morning and every other hour. But then they put them on buses, on trains, on planes, and nobody knows where they go. And so every elected official's heard about this problem. The problem is some of those elected officials have put their head in the sand for far too long. They're not going to be able to hide from this anymore because there will be a vote on the House floor where every member of Congress, Republican, Democrat, will have to take a side. Are you going to side with people who are sick and tired of watching 300 young people die every single day? Or are you going to do something about it like we are? And shame on them if they hide from this problem any longer. Yeah.
If I can ask a two-part question. You talked a lot about new investments that you would make on the border. How would you pay for that under the spending bill that you passed yesterday? And then second, as a way of trying to get this bill enacted into law, would any one of you accept a provision to help dreamers as part of the bill?
Well, first of all, on the funding, the border, all the different entities under Homeland Security have all the money they need to solve this problem. What they've done is taken specific action to make the problem worse. And then it becomes more expensive. When President Biden says the border's open, by getting rid of Remain in Mexico, by stopping construction of the wall, and we went to some of these sites. I remember one of the first border trips I took after President Biden created this problem. They took us, the Border Patrol agents, we got to embed with the Border Patrol agents, so you see just how bad it is and why. And they took us to one of the abandoned work sites. So President Biden was paying the construction company that was tasked with building the wall, he was paying them not to build the wall. It's sort of what he did paying people not to work. It's actually more expensive to do that because then you don't get the economic benefit of the money you're spending. So you're spending money to not do something that would have actually saved the taxpayers money. By making the border process work properly and securing the border, we will save billions of taxpayer dollars, and it's a long time coming. I know it went through your committee if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, so we did cut go, which is our commitment to America too, right? When we built the rules of how this House would operate. So if you look at the back of the bill, there are very specific programs listed to cut to cover where we increase the money. So for example, the bonus that's going to go to the retention bonus that's going to go to the Border Patrol guys, $9,000 roughly per agent. That's $100 million. You can see where we take that money from in there. It's a minimal amount, but the cuts are at the bottom of the bill, and the plus ups are in those personnel numbers.
Last question.
And the
What about
Dreamers?
Central America? So Secretary Mayorkas just put out a proposal to help ease the influx once Title 42 comes to an end. Part of that proposal is to create more processing centers in Central America. Do you think that would in any way reduce the volume of migrants coming to the U.S. border?
What President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas are doing are doubling down on the failed policies that created this problem rather than working with us to solve the problem. Again, we have the most generous immigration system in the world. America lets in over 1 million people a year legally into our country. It's part of the American dream story that we all tell. So many of us are families of immigrants. And there is a legal process to come here. And I think that's what the president forgets about, is that people want to get back to the legal process. So this idea that you just create more opportunities for people to come here illegally and then look the other way, that's what created the Dreamer problem. That's what created this new problem, is that they're encouraging people to come into America legally, knowing they don't have valid asylum claims, they don't have beds to house them. There's no mechanism when they send them to other states to take care of those folks. They don't care about those people. They're just bringing them here for some political agenda, and then they don't care what happens to them after, but they have no plan for them. What we're saying is let's get back to the legal system that should be working for everybody. Everybody should know what the rules are to come to America, just like any other country. Other countries have limits on how many people come into their nations, and their numbers are a lot lower than ours. Name a nation that's close to us. Over 1 million people a year we let in legally every year.
The more you incentivize people, the bigger the wave will be. And all the processing centers do is provide more incentive. Oh, the door's even more open. All I got to do is get a coyote from the drug cartel to fill out my CBP One app for me. I'm sure they're paying another little extra fee to get that done. Every single thing Alejandro Mayorkas is doing is to speed more people into this country. You take a look at his budget. It's intentional. They cut CBP and put billions more into a contingency fund to bring more people into the country. This is intentional. And the drug cartels are seizing the day to get more fentanyl in here and make more money. And you ask the parents of that little baby, how many of you have children? Was crawling around on the floor of a VRBO in Florida. The tenant before had fentanyl. The little baby was dead. Every single American is at risk for these ridiculous open door policies. Well, we've had enough. And these bills and the men and women who've done the work to put this together are saying no more.
And I do want to make this point before the final question, because we haven't talked about this yet. Today, we've talked about this in other settings, and I think all of you know this. However much it gets covered, it's not enough. What President Biden has done to open up the southern border has created a multi-billion-dollar industry for the drug cartels of Mexico. President Biden is providing billions of dollars to the drug cartels in Mexico, who now have operational control over our southern border. Every American ought to be outraged about that, and by the way, most are. And not only are they getting a multi-billion-dollar windfall, the drug cartels, what they're doing to these young kids. We've seen it, the rapes, the human trafficking. Not only the deaths, 300 deaths a day should be enough, but all of the other things that they're doing to these young kids are bringing across as they're making billions of dollars off of the trafficking is disgusting. Joe Biden ought to be disgusted about it. The thing is, Joe Biden can do something about it. He created this problem. He needs to work with us to solve this problem. Last question.
Yes, sir. I was wondering, I know a number of members of the GOP conference believe that Mr. Mayorkas should be impeached or forced out somehow. Does House leadership have a position on that?
What we have said is all options need to be on the table, but we need to get the facts out. And these committees have been doing a great job of getting the facts out as they've been writing these pieces of legislation that are critically important. So we've been working on two fronts. One is legislating, which is a very critical piece of our job in the majority, but the other is the oversight and accountability part. And the good news is all of these committees have been doing both. They've been having hearings to get more facts, and let's let the facts lead where they may. We haven't limited in any way what they can go and find out or what happens once we find out all the facts, but we're also taking the lead to legislate to fix this problem. And if the people that are there aren't fixing it, which they're not, Secretary Mayorkas has said over and over again the border's secure. Joe Biden has said the border's secure. Kamala Harris has said the border's secure. Every American knows the border's not secure. And so it's about time they start shooting straight with the American people. But we're not going to sit back and try to play that charade they are. We're actually working to fix this problem as we hold people accountable who have created this crisis that Americans are facing every single day. Thank you all, and we'll see you on the floor in 2 weeks on this bill.
Do you guys have Tony Gonzalez's backing for this?
Talk to Tony, but he's been working really hard to help us get here.
We'll come to the floor as an open roll.
He supported the bill last night.
Every time.